Barrister has sparked outrage by saying men should be cleared of rape when a woman claims she only consented to sex because she was drunk. Rape campaign groups have condemned Barrister David Osborne's claim on his website. In an article he has called "She Was Gagging for It." This is a practising barrister. Now, he has gone further by criticising women for going out at night and dressing provocatively, and claims it sends out a message: I'm loose and I'm free. David Osborne has been speaking to me, and I began by asking him if he was saying that if someone was so drunk they were incapable of saying no, was he saying it was their fault for getting drunk and therefore a defence for a rapist?
I think 2 points arise from that. The first point is that everybody should be, certainly an adult, should be responsible for the consequences of their own action and their own behaviour. So girls who go out what I would call inappropriately dressed, and I don't say that because I'm 71 years old. I say that because I can see for myself on a cold winter's night girls going around in very flimsy dresses, what I would call inappropriately dressed, and that sends out the wrong message.
What message does it send out?
It sends out the message is I'm loose and I'm free.
Because of how they're dressed?
Correct. That's the first thing. The second thing...
Hold on, let's just stay on that, because we'll walk through these.
Yeah.
So because someone is in a short skirt, you're saying they're saying I'm loose and I'm free?
Well, it's a combination of short skirt and general behaviour. But you don't go out on a cold winter's night dressed what I would call provocatively if all you're planning to do is... have a lime and tonic water.
So if someone is dressed, as you describe it, provocatively, it's a cold night and they're wearing short skirt, what do you think the message is that they're sending, David?
Well, they are sending a message which is, I am, I don't say necessarily up for sexual intercourse, but I'm up for a good time, which includes, obviously, drinking a fair amount of alcohol, which they do. Obviously, it's not just girls, but girls are the ones who complain. And so they've got to be, in my opinion, a bit more careful about the way they behave.
And therefore, if someone who is dressed provocatively, David, and you're a barrister and you're a practising barrister, correct?
Yeah, that's right.
So if someone is dressed, as you describe it, provocatively, and you describe that means that they're saying they're loose and free, if a man then has consent with that person, if a man then has sex with that person, are you saying it's their fault?
Well, hang on. The issue here, it seems to me, is whether or not there is consent to the sexual act. The difference between sexual intercourse and rape, as you will appreciate, is consent.
But you're suggesting how they're dressed it suggests consent.
What I'm saying is how they are dressed suggests a sort of behaviour which is open to exploitation, let's put it that way.
What do you mean? Open to exploitation by whom?
Well, by somebody, obviously a lad or a bloke, who's going to take one look at the girl and say to himself, she looks like a goer, or whatever the expression is these days. And in those circumstances, he may well approach her, say, hello, do you, then the conversation, I don't know how the conversation goes, but eventually finishes up with, would you like, whatever expression he uses, which means, would you like sex?
So do you think it's irresponsible for women to dress provocatively?
I think it's irresponsible in the circumstances that you and I are discussing, going out on the town, going to pubs and going to clubs with dressed as the way that they are, does send out certain messages, certain signals. I don't know about you, but I certainly know from my professional experience that that is what happens, that these girls are approached by men or lads, whatever you like to call them, because they are sending out a certain signal.
You know, David, some people will will find it outrageous that you're putting some of the responsibility on a female just because of how she chooses to dress. The signal that she's trying to send out, surely, David, is that these are the clothes that she's chosen to wear. Why are you reading more into it than that? Why are you reading that if someone decides to wear a short dress, that you're suggesting they are loose and free?
Because that is the impression that they give.
By their dress?
And obviously the way they dress and the manner that they behave as a result of the way in which they dress sends out certain signals. I mean, you haven't, presumably, most of us who have been out on an evening, wherever we live and whatever town we live in, can see groups of girls, sometimes groups of girls and boys, who are going around what I would call inappropriately dressed, sending out the wrong signals. Now, I may be wrong, in which case this discussion is academic, because if I'm wrong, nobody is going to try and take advantage of them, and nobody's going to cry sex.
Well, what's potentially wrong, David? Because just to remind people, you are a practicing barrister.
Yes.
So you're in a very respected profession.
Yeah.
And you are an intelligent man. And to attribute loose and free just because of how a female is dressed is dangerous, David. Is it not? Forget about what signal the female is sending out. What signal are you sending out in saying that? What message are you sending? Loose and free. Loose and free.
Think for a moment. What message are they actually sending out when they're dressed like that? You tell me if you disagree with it. What message do you say they're sending out?
Maybe they like the clothes, David.
What?
Maybe they like the clothes. Maybe there's nothing loose about them. Maybe there's nothing free about them. Maybe they want to look sexy. It doesn't mean that they're loose, and it doesn't mean that they're free for sex.
In which case, they won't be abused, and they won't have to cry rape, will they?
Cry rape?
Correct.
What do you mean by that?
Well, by what I'm saying is that when girls, following the theme that you're describing, girls looking provocative and dressed provocatively are likely to attract males who are interested not in discussing the intellectual content of the newspaper they've just read. They're interested in having a relationship, or a one-night stand as it's called, which will invariably result in sexual intercourse. And it wouldn't happen if these particular girls weren't, as I say, dressed provocatively, which is sending out a certain message. But that's not the point of...
it wouldn't happen if they weren't dressed provocatively.
Hang on, this is not the point of this interview. Let's get to the nub of this interview. The criticism I have had since the article from the Daily Mirror has been that I have stated that somebody, a girl who is under the influence of alcohol or drugs, cannot cry rape. Now, that needs to be amended. I've told your colleague that I have amended that. And
why did you write it in the first place? Do you admit it was a mistake?
It was it was poorly worded.
What did you mean?
What I meant was, and what I was trying to get across against the background of witness coaching and against the background of treating witnesses or complainants of sexual offences is to try and show to a jury, at least, that there are other explanations that they should take into account.
So if I can just explore again, so we've dealt with the issue of dress. So again, if someone goes out and they're drunk, you're suggesting, are you, that person, by being drunk, is giving consent? Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm not saying that.
What are you saying?
I'm saying that obviously drink is a factor in one's self-control, and that we all know. The fact that somebody has drunk too much and is intoxicated is, again, a factor.
I've always found it distasteful and unattractive, the suggestion you wrote, that as the victim was blind drunk, she was therefore unable to give her consent to sex, or more to the point, she gave her consent, which she should not have given had she been sober. In my book, you write, consent is consent, blind, drunk or otherwise.
Yep.
And regret after the event cannot make it rape, as Miss Saunders and Miss Harman seem to be advocating. I have a simple solution, you say. If the complainant was under the influence of alcohol or drugs, or both, when she was raped, this provides the accused with a complete defence. Do you stand over that?
Well, have you seen the postscript?
Yes, but I want you to explain to me.
No, I will refer you and your listeners to the postscript. If the complainant or victim is under the influence of drink or drugs, she is perfectly entitled to refuse consent. It is quite wrong to take advantage of her drunkenness, and the red-blooded male proceeds at his peril. Does that help with the answer to your question?
Yeah, but you said it's quite wrong to take advantage of her drunkenness, and I understand that, of course. Most right-minded people would think that, David.
Good.
But what is the culpability? What is the responsibility of the drunk female, in your view?
Well, the responsibility, I mean, so when people get drunk, as a matter of fact, they tend to lose self-control. They tend to lose a sense of judgment, and sometimes they make the wrong judgment. So one of the issues for a jury to consider, which is the purpose of this article, is whether or not, with what the complainant was saying, the way in which the complainant was dressed, what the complainant was doing, whether that is something, which I say it is, which the jury should take into account when deciding if the girl was giving consent. You see,
David, I when I read your article, I understood what you were saying in your postscript, insofar as you said that the lady is perfectly entitled to refuse consent, okay? And you made that clear.
Yeah.
But what I'm unclear about is your view on if the lady is too drunk to speak. So therefore, she can't refuse consent, but she also can't verbalise consent. She's lying in bed and she's drunk.
Well, that's not an issue I've addressed in my blog at all.
Well, it kind of is, and I think it is, because you have said that consent is consent, blind, drunk, or otherwise.
Correct.
So if someone is blind drunk and is in bed and cannot speak, and they've got themselves drunk, do you think they're responsible for being there and being drunk, and therefore someone can have sex with them?
No, I'm saying that clearly isn't consent. If somebody's blind drunk to the extent they can't speak, obviously the person concerned is not giving consent. That's a matter of common sense.
But they can't say no.
They can't say yes either.
Okay.
So I'm not suggesting for a moment that somebody who is incapable through alcohol of expressing a yes or a no, that somebody should come along and say, well, I'm going to take that as a yes. Well, I wouldn't suggest that for a moment. What I'm saying is that somebody, and I've had this in my own professional experience, somebody who, under the influence of drink, consents to sex and regrets it in the next morning when she sobers up and persuades herself and tries to persuade the jury with the help of Ms. Saunders, that in fact it wasn't consent at all.
Do you think when you're writing about rape and rapists, do you think using the title in your blog, "She Was Gagging for It," is appropriate?
Well, when you look at the whole of the article, and let me quote, my considerable experience tells me there are basically two defences to an allegation of rape. Either it wasn't me, Gov, or she was gagging for it.
Yeah.
So there's the two defences. If you can think of another one, you let me know, and I'll amend my blog with courtesy of your contribution. But that is, generally speaking, the two defences. Either it wasn't me, I wasn't there, and therefore she's mistaken, or it was, yes, it was me, but we had sexual intercourse with consent. Now, I have vulgarised that by the expression "she was gagging for," but that's called being commercial, I suppose, or that's the way it goes. That's the way I write my blogs, and I'm not going to apologise for it.
You've had a fair bit of criticism about this. You've been front page national news. Have you been surprised by the reaction?
I suppose I have, yes. I have. But with the clarification that I've now added, I hope that that will stem the tide of criticism, but equally it should perhaps be noted on your programme that those in favour of my article are about, it's split along gender lines. So there are a number of people who feel that the post that I have loaded regarding this is entirely appropriate.
That's David Osborne, who is a practising barrister, lives in England, works in England. Your reaction today then, 08459 555 678. Dennis in Whitehead, first call of the day. Morning, Dennis.
Morning, Stephen. Listen to that conversation you were having with the gentleman there, Stephen. Seems to me, Stephen, that he hasn't done his homework originally and thought this thing through, because he was backtracking there a wee bit in clarification and whatnot. And it would appear to me that, if a girl goes out for a night, she's free to wear whatever she wants. Now, if you're receiving signals as he describes them, the problem then is with you. It's not with the girl. The girl's totally within the law, and she's entitled to the protection of the law. Now, this presumption that she's given some type of encouragement because of the clothes she's wearing is very, very dangerous, because she's an innocent party.
And the other thing is, and let's remind ourselves about this. Let's bring Emma Wolfe into this, the commentator. Morning to you, Emma.
Good morning.
The other thing,
I'm absolutely speechless.
Go ahead, though. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, let's be clear. Rape comes down to precisely one thing, and that is the decision of the rapist to commit a crime. Rape is a crime. Wearing a short skirt or drinking alcohol, which is fun, can be a way of celebrating, that is not a crime. And as you say, I mean, the wording of this man, it's really worrying that this is a practicing barrister. I think he's practicing in the Middle Ages. A woman wearing a short skirt, that is not a crime, and we don't live under Sharia law. And this man is not a policeman about clothing. And effectively, his wording, he called throughout that interview and females and lady, and he refers to females as girls. And I think that says everything. He refers to them crying rape, and he refers to red-blooded males, as if it's somehow, we know what red-blooded males means. It means it's normal and healthy.
He says a woman clearly does not have the capacity to make a choice if she is completely unconscious through the effects of drink and drugs. But there are various stages of consciousness, from being wide awake to dim awareness of reality. In a state of dim and drunken awareness, you may or may not be in a condition to make choices. So you will need to consider the evidence of the complainant's state and decide these two questions. Was she in a condition in which she was capable of making any choice one way or another? If you're sure that she was not, then she did not consent. If, on the other hand, you conclude that she chose to agree to sexual intercourse or may have done, then you must find the defendants not guilty.
Okay, whatever happened to enthusiastic consent, which is where you sleep with someone who is absolutely up for it?
Sorry, those comments were from a judge, actually, on the definition of drunken consent. I didn't think they sounded like
why are we focusing on the complainant, as he calls it, on the victim? Why are we not focusing on the fact that the rape is perpetrated by, well, it could be a male or a female, but it's a crime. It's not we shouldn't be focusing so much on what the woman is wearing or what she might have drunk.
Mrs. White, good morning, Mrs. White.
Who owns a woman's body? Who owns a woman's body?
Hello, good morning, Mr. Nolan. I would like to agree 100% with the barrister, although I don't agree with the vulgar title of his article. Nevertheless, he is absolutely right. And feminism is responsible for telling women to dress whatever way they like, to behave whatever way they like, and it's no one's business but theirs. But that is utter nonsense. And I'd like to quote a detective from America who had 17 years of experience.
But Mrs. White... Mrs. White.
So this is such a crucial point, Mr. Nolan. The detective said that in most cases of sexual assault that he has investigated in 17 years of experience, women who were provocatively dressed figured highly in the victims of that particular crime. So there is a definite link between immodesty and crime.
Mrs. White, no matter how a woman is dressed, it does not excuse in any way, shape or form someone committing an assault on that woman. No matter how, Mrs. White, a woman is dressed, it is not the woman giving consent to sex. Indeed, even if a woman is up for sex, even if a woman is trying to attract someone for sex, it's for her to decide not who to have sex with, and it is not a green light to anybody and everybody to have sex with her. Obviously,
exactly.
Mrs.
And
White.
all this nonsense about sending out signals. A woman's body is her own body. When I dress up and when I wear a short skirt, I do it because I think it looks nice, or I do it because I've had fun with my girlfriends getting dressed up and going out. That is not a signal to anyone to commit a crime.
Madam, you are a feminist and you are a fool. And you and your ilk are responsible for the degradation in society. Drunkenness, immorality, immodesty, adultery, fornication can all be laid at the door of wicked,
Rape has been going on for centuries. Rape has been going on for centuries, and many rapes happen within the context of marriages and relationships. So it's got nothing to do with women going out and wearing what they want to wear. It's got to do with men deciding to commit a crime.
Listen, feminists have suggested that men be falsely accused of rape to dismantle the patriarchy. Now, what do you say to that, madam? Feminists make false accusations of rape to dismantle the patriarchy.
Oh, yes, because it's so much fun going through a rape trial, I'm sure.
Here's Claire this morning. Stay there, Mrs. White. Claire, good morning.
Good morning, Stephen.
Go ahead.
I was listening to what the judge was saying, and the barrister was saying as well. It's just getting me so angry, and I read the...
Well, now, let's remember, I actually mixed the comments up. So the judge was actually talking about the Ched Evans case. That's what I read more recently. What this barrister, David Osborne, who works in England, has said... He has basically said, you heard the interview there, he has basically said that women shouldn't dress provocatively because it sends out a message that they are, quote, loose and free. This is a practising barrister, Claire. And he has also said, and let me just read from his blog, I've always found it distasteful and unattractive, the suggestion that as the victim was blind drunk, she therefore was unable to give her consent to sex, or more to the point, she gave her consent which she would not have given had she been sober. In my book, consent is consent, blind, drunk or otherwise, and regret after the event cannot make it rape. I have a very simple solution. If the complainant, I do not refer to her as the victim, he says, was under the influence of alcohol or drugs or both when she was raped, this provides the accused with a complete defence. End of story, and a victory for fairness, moderation and common sense. Now, he has since amended his blog to say that of course a woman can say no, Claire, but that's what this practising barrister initially wrote.
Yep, and I sort of read it over the weekend as well, and I would just call for him to be sacked. I think it's absolutely horrendous. And where in all of that does he start looking at rapist behaviour? Where does he start addressing that? You know, why do nuns get raped? Why do women in hijabs get raped? Why do children get raped? Why do old women get raped? What focus has this man got?
Exactly, I completely agree, and the focus is so relentlessly on the complainant, whom he refuses to call a victim. We have to look at the behaviour of any other crime. You look at the behaviour of the criminal or of the alleged perpetrator. You don't look at the focus so relentlessly on the behaviour of the victim.
It's almost fantasist that he is focusing solely on these drunk women, as he calls it. And he also said in that article that if women don't want to be raped, don't go out.
Yeah, and don't wear a short skirt.
Mrs. White?
And what is this about inappropriately dressed? Who is appropriately deciding what is appropriate?
Mrs. White?
Yes, I noticed that you have two feminists there. One of them, the latter, is
feminists, we're women.
Claire Bailey of the Green Party. I recognise her voice, an arch-feminist. I would say rape has always been around. However, feminism has blurred the difference between actual rape and the rape that is used to forward the feminist agenda. All this nonsense about consent.
Rape is not used to forward any agenda, Mrs. White.
Absolutely
Rape is not used to forward any agenda.
Sir,
Rape is
sir, are you going to listen?
Well, I can't let you just say things that are absolutely insane.
They are not insane, sir. They are true, and I can prove it.
Can we stay on?
Can say them as well.
Can we stay on the actual issues here, Mrs. White, which is that this barrister is raising objections to how women are dressed and putting some culpability on a woman who is assaulted because of how she is dressed. Now, you would disagree with that, Mrs. White, wouldn't you?
Rape is a crime. I clearly state rape is a crime. But a woman who is drunk out of her mind, provocatively dressed, flirting with men, she is culpable.
All of those actions are they are not crimes.
And what a shame to put all that onto young men as well. Are we saying that men are not responsible for controlling themselves?
Men are not animals. Of course they are to restrain themselves. And even in the midst of provocative, flirtatious women, of course men must flee from such women. Too many do not, because many men today are drunken lights, just as women are drunken, provocative women.
Mrs. White, answer Claire's point. Why then do children, but why are they raped? Why are old people raped? Why are nuns or people in hijabs raped? It's not about the action of the victim. It's about the action of the criminal, of the perpetrator.
Madam, the whole society is sex-obsessed. The internet, pornographic magazines, pornographic movies. The whole society is saturated with sex. That's why there's a higher rate of sexual crimes than in previous years when such things were taboo, and rightly so.
Claire?
Yes, and they were hidden, and there is a higher rate of reporting now.
What I believe really needs to happen is that we need to start having a good look at how our judiciary treat this crime. I think that's the real issue. We have so far to go. I think in 2011 in Northern Ireland, 440 people came forward and reported rape. Only 78 of those ever made it into a courtroom. I don't know how many of those were actually prosecuted, but for me, there lies the problem. And listening to this judge coming out with these comments...
Not judge, barrister.
Barrister, sorry, Barrister. But there you go. That's why maybe we need to start looking at how we deal with this.
Robin's in Bangor. 08459 555 678. Go ahead, Robin.
Yeah, it's interesting to listen to the banter between these women in particular. I don't really think it matters how a woman is dressed. It's the fact that she gets drunk beyond her own control. Just like a man gets drunk beyond his own control. It's ludicrous. It's up to the woman and the man to act appropriately. I'm not against drinking. I enjoy a drink. But to go out and get blind drunk...
No matter how drunk you are, Robin, it doesn't mean that you can be assaulted. That's what rape is.
If a woman gets blind drunk, she doesn't know what she's doing, and half times they're pawing over everybody. You see it all the time.
Some of these comments are extraordinary. If a woman gets blind drunk, Robin, it doesn't mean that it's okay to assault her. No. You do hear that, don't you?
Yeah, it doesn't matter. It doesn't mean you can assault her. But whenever she starts pawing all over you and sitting on your knee and everything else...
No matter what she does, if she has not consented to sex, then it is not... This is genuinely surprising me. We'll pause there. We'll get the news. I'll come back to you after the news. Hold on. 9:33. Here's Anne-Marie. Right, I'm actually genuinely surprised by some of the reaction this morning, and from people like you, Robin, to draw any type of link. Hold on, to draw any type of link between a woman being drunk and what she is or isn't doing, in your words, pawing over someone. It doesn't matter if a woman is pawing over someone. It doesn't matter if a woman sits on someone's knee. Consent is very clear, Robin. Yeah, if a woman is not giving consent to sex, then the law says that is rape. Full stop. That's what the law says.
Exactly. But whenever they go through with it and then wake up in the morning and go, oh my God, what have I done? Is that rape?
No, it's not rape. If a woman has consented to sex...
But she cries rape and gets away with it.
Emma Wolfe?
I'm really concerned at the opinions of your callers. I don't understand why we're focusing on the woman who dresses up and goes out and has a night out. It's as simple as that.
It's not so much focusing on the woman having a night out. If anybody goes out and just gets blind drunk, you know, what is the point?
Alcohol is a completely legal substance. I mean, I genuinely don't understand.
Misuse of anything is, you might as well say...
So do we have to protect ourselves? Do we have to be constantly on the alert for anything that might provoke a man into an attack? I mean, are we living in a Sharia state?
You're exaggerating.
No, I'm not.
Constantly
I don't know
alert.
where you draw the line.
If you're constantly alert to the fact that you might be being a bit provocative, you're obviously not that drunk. It's when they're drunk, and men are the same. It's when they get
so now they're not allowed to drink.
Sorry?
Women are not really allowed to drink.
You see, this is it. You turn everything round.
But where is the line? Where is the line, Robert?
Men are allowed to drink. It's the amount.
Here's Dan in Belfast.
You go out and get blind drunk.
Morning, Dan.
Oh, morning, Stephen. I just am appalled by the judge's remarks.
Barrister.
We were all going out in the 60s.
Not a judge, a barrister.
Oh, a barrister, sorry. We were all going out in the 60s and lots of miniskirts, and we had parties and we had alcohol. I mean, a woman can't give consent, even if she has alcohol, just not giving consent. So the onus is on the man, the person that's committing the rape. That's what it's about.
So what? Like I said again, I'm shocked by some of the comments this morning, Diane.
Yes, I'm very shocked indeed.
And you've heard Mrs. White basically saying that there is some responsibility on the woman to dress appropriately.
Well, what does she mean by dress appropriately? I mean, a woman wears what she wears. She goes out, as we were doing many years ago, going out in miniskirts and had parties.
What do you deem?
We're not giving consent to rape.
What do you deem as appropriately dressed, Mrs. White?
Well, for a start, I don't use the word appropriate. That's a politically correct term. I speak of modest dress, modest. What do I term modest? I'd be happy to explain.
How long should the skirt be?
It should be, definitely below the knee.
Oh, my goodness.
At least 2 inches, at least below the knee. It should not be tight. If women wear trousers, which I am not always...
I wonder why you only got 67 votes in the council election you stood for.
I beg your pardon?
I wonder why you only got 67 votes in the council election you stood for.
How interesting you would bring that up now, Mr. Nolan. What has that to do with this present discussion, sir?
What has it to do with the present discussion that Claire Bailey is from the Green Party? I mean, really? What
has my election result, Mr. Nolan? What has my election result to do with this discussion?
I'm simply raising your election result to signal how much support you had. You stand on your principles, and that's how much support you got. 67 votes, Mrs. White.
Mr. Nolan, if I had only received one vote, it wouldn't change my opinion one.
No, it wouldn't.
Whatsoever.
But some people might interpret it that you're out of touch.
I think I am more up to date than many of these callers. I see
and
things.
67 people agreed with you.
I see things as they really are, and I tell it like it is. And regarding modest clothing, no plunging necklines. There should be high necklines. Nothing should be tight.
Well, we're going back to the Stone Age here.
We really are going back to the Stone Age.
How dare you, sir?
And the barrister could really set up a new state. It's called Mormonism.
What has Mormonism got to do with this?
Diane?
Well, we all have to go out dressed like nuns then. I mean, women of all ages get raped. Older women like me, very young children get raped. I mean, it's nothing to do with the way you're dressed.
Listen, I have nothing whatsoever to do with Mormonism. I'm an evangelical Christian. I don't know why someone mentioned Mormonism. What has evil Mormonism got to do with this present discussion?
It's having rules about what you can and cannot wear. It's using terms like inappropriately dressed.
Will you take that up with the Mormons, Madam? Take that up with the Mormons. I have nothing.
We're not talking about Mormonism.
Nothing to do with Mormonism. Nothing.
We're not talking. I think you've made that very, very clear. What's your view, Diane, on this barrister who's still practising, who's still going into court, who's still...
I think he's appalling, actually, you know. I wouldn't like him to be involved in any case of rape.
Yeah, okay. Diana in Ballymena. Morning, Diana.
Morning, Stephen. I do agree with him to a certain extent.
With the barrister?
Yes. I am now a pensioner, but I wore short skirts for a long time when I was younger, and I was always very aware that I was giving out certain signals, and you have to be, if you behave in certain ways, you're giving out certain signals. You're supposed to be responsible for yourself and responsible for what happens to you.
Exactly what I've been saying.
I'm not saying you deserve to be raped, but I'm saying you have to be aware of what you're doing.
Exactly what I've been saying.
You see that if you look at the Ched Evans case, okay, What happened in that case is that the woman was drunk. And what the court decided, and it's really, really interesting, and we really should take this on board. What the court decided is that she couldn't have given consent because she was so drunk, and therefore Ched Evans was guilty of rape. So it is the duty on the man to determine whether someone has the capacity to give consent.
Why should the man have to be a lot more responsible than the woman? Are two people not responsible for what happens? Are they not equally responsible for what happens?
Can I also say, by the way, that obviously men can be raped too. We're using the example here of a man and a woman because it's the example that this barrister gave, and that's the only reason we're doing so. But Diana, if a woman is drunk and does not have the capacity, is so out of it that she doesn't have the capacity to give consent, then if you have sex with that woman, that is rape.
Yes, it is. I'm not saying she deserves to be raped. I'm just saying you have a certain responsibility. Anybody who goes out anywhere has a certain responsibility for what happens to them. If you went out somewhere in a car and you got blind drunk and you drove home and killed somebody, you'd be held responsible for that.
But when you say a certain responsibility, what do you mean? How far does that responsibility go? So I guess, you've got a responsibility if you're drunk not to get into your car. But do you have a responsibility if you're drunk not to end up alone with a man? Is that what you're trying to hint at?
Yes, I think so.
Really?
Yes. I think you've got to be aware of the signals you're giving out. You've got to be aware of what you're doing.
Exactly. If they're giving out the signal and they go home with that guy.
Yeah.
What does that suggest?
Yeah.
Emma?
Okay, what if you're walking home with a man? Seriously, because where is the line here? I don't like this casting of women as, making it as though we're constantly on the alert and we have to protect ourselves and we have to obviously responsible behaviour is one thing. What if I'm walking home with a man and we're walking down an alleyway and I'm drunk and he rapes me in an alleyway? Is that my responsibility?
Well, I wouldn't go down the alleyway with a man if I was drunk.
You know what I mean. I mean that you're alone with a man and he takes advantage of the situation. That is a crime.
Yes, that is.
No less. It's simple.
Yeah.
It's not to do with being loose and free. It's not to do with sending out provocative messages. Who decides what's provocative?
I mean, it's a certain extent. I mean, if you go down with somebody down an alley or something like that, I mean, are you not to a certain extent leading them on?
I mean, you're walking home. You're walking home down a street. You know what I mean about an alleyway.
Are you walking home with somebody you don't know? Because if you're going to do that,
all of these.
Again, I mean, you got to be careful who you walk home with.
But what if someone's being nice? You're muddying the water saying it depends if you're blind drunk. It depends on. All of these things are kind of, that they are degrees. But the fact is, it's a crime. If you commit a crime, it's a crime to attack a woman who is not able to give consent or who has said no.
If she is that drunk that she falls asleep and can't give consent, that's rape. End of story. It is rape. But if she's that drunk and leading the guy on, and it turns into them having sex, is that rape? When she wakes up in the morning and goes, "What have I done?"
What the law says.
I don't know what you mean.
The law is very clear, Robin. If someone is that drunk that there is a doubt about whether they know what they're doing, about whether they know what they're doing or not, then that is rape.
That's right.
If there is a doubt that that person is consenting to sex, then it is rape if you have sex with that person. It's why we're doing this programme today, to make this clear to people. That's where the line is.
That's where the line is.
If you are not sure that someone is consenting to sex, then it is rape.
I think that's a really good message. Just be really, really clear about it. And just, you need clear consent.
You need clear consent, but a lot of women and a lot of men, it's both ends of the thing. They go out, they get drunk, and then what? They stagger home together and have sex. And then one of them wakes up in the morning. The guy might be married and go, "What have I done?" And the girl wakes up and thinks, "What have I done?" and cries rape. The guy is punished.
Can I be honest with you?
The guy is exercise. He is just.
It's not a fun thing to do. Women don't cry rape for fun. It just isn't. It's not like that.
Okay, listen, we're going to leave it there. Really interesting discussion this morning. Emma, thank you. Mrs. White, thank you. Thank you to all of you who have called us this morning. 9:45. This discussion kicking off on Twitter now, at Stephen Nolan. See some of you commenting. You can continue to do so right now, of course, on our Twitter club, at Stephen Nolan. There are 103,000 of you reading those messages. Are you saying it's their fault?
Well, hang on. The issue here, it seems to me, is whether or not there is consent to the sexual act. The difference between sexual intercourse and rape, as you will appreciate, is consent.
But you're suggesting how they're dressed suggests consent.
What I'm saying is how they are dressed suggests a sort of behaviour which is open to exploitation, let's put it that way.
What do you mean? Open to exploitation by whom?
Well, by somebody, obviously a lad or a bloke, who's going to take one look at the girl and say to himself, she looks like a goer, or whatever the expression is these days. And in those circumstances, he may well approach her, say, hello, do you... then the conversation, I don't know how the conversation goes, but eventually it finishes up with, would you like, whatever expression he uses, which means, would you like sex?
So do you think it's irresponsible for women to dress provocatively?
I think it's irresponsible in the circumstances that you and I are discussing. Going out on the town, going to pubs and going to clubs with... dressed the way that they are, this discussion is academic. Because if I'm wrong, nobody is going to try and take advantage of them, and nobody's going to cry sex.
Well, what's potentially wrong, David? Because just to remind people, you are a practicing barrister.
Yes.
So you're in a very respected profession.
Yeah.
And you are an intelligent man. And to attribute loose and free just because of how a female is dressed is dangerous, David. Is it not? Forget about what signal the female is sending out. What signal are you sending out in saying that? What message are you sending? Loose and free. Loose and free.
Think for a moment. What message are they actually sending out when they're dressed like that? You tell me if you disagree with it. What message do you say they're sending out?
Maybe they like the clothes, David.
What?
Maybe they like the clothes. Maybe there's nothing loose about them. Maybe there's nothing free about them. Maybe they want to look sexy. It doesn't mean that they're loose, and it doesn't mean that they're free for sex.
In which case, they won't be abused, and they won't have to cry rape, will they?
Cry rape?
Correct.
What do you mean by that?
Well, by what I'm saying is that when girls, following the theme that you're describing, girls looking provocative and dressed provocatively are likely to attract males who are interested not in does send out certain messages, certain signals. I don't know about you, but I certainly know from my professional experience that that is what happens, that these girls are approached by men or lads, whatever you like to call them, because they are sending out a certain signal.
David, some people will find it outrageous that you're putting some of the responsibility on a female just because of how she chooses to dress. The signal that she's trying to send out, surely, David, is that these are the clothes that she's chosen to wear. Why are you reading more into it than that? Why are you reading that if someone decides to wear a short dress, that you're suggesting they are loose and free?
Because that is the impression that they give.
By their dress?
And obviously the way they dress and the manner that they behave as a result of the way in which they dress sends out certain signals. I mean, you haven't, presumably, most of us who have been out on an evening, wherever we live and whatever town we live in, can see groups of girls, sometimes groups of girls and boys, who are going around what I would call inappropriately dressed, sending out the wrong signals. Now, I may be wrong, in which case...
The Stephen Nolan Show.
Barrister has sparked outrage by saying men should be cleared of rape when a woman claims she only consented to sex because she was drunk. Rape campaign groups have condemned Barrister David Osborne's claim on his website. In an article he has called "She Was Gagging for It." This is a practising barrister. Now, he has gone further by criticising women for going out at night and dressing provocatively, and claims it sends out a message: I'm loose and I'm free. David Osborne has been speaking to me, and I began by asking him if he was saying that if someone was so drunk they were incapable of saying no, was he saying it was their fault for getting drunk and therefore a defence for a rapist?
Well, I think 2 points arise from that. The first point is that everybody should be, certainly an adult, should be responsible for the consequences of their own action and their own behaviour. So girls who go out what I would call inappropriately dressed, and I don't say that because I'm 71 years old. I say that because I can see for myself on a cold winter's night, girls going around in very flimsy dresses, what I would call inappropriately dressed, and that sends out the wrong message.
What message does it send out?
It sends out the message is, I'm loose and I'm free.
Because of how they're dressed?
Correct. That's the first thing. The second thing...
Hold on, let's just stay on that, because we'll walk through these.
Yeah.
So because someone is in a short skirt, you're saying they're saying, I'm loose and I'm free?
Well, it's a combination of short skirt and general behaviour. But you don't go out on a cold winter's night dressed what I would call provocatively if all you're planning to do is have a lime and tonic water.
So if someone is dressed, as you describe it, provocatively,
yeah.
It's a cold night and they're wearing short skirt.
Yeah.
What do you think the message is that they're sending, David?
Well, they are sending a message which is, I am, I don't say necessarily up for sexual intercourse, but I'm up for a good time, which includes, obviously, drinking a fair amount of alcohol, which they do. Obviously, it's not just girls, but girls are the ones who complain. And so they've got to be, in my opinion, a bit more careful about the way they behave.
And therefore, if someone who is dressed provocatively, David, and you're a barrister and you're a practising barrister, correct?
Yeah, that's right.
So if someone is dressed, as you describe it, provocatively, and you describe that means that they're saying they're loose and free, if a man then has consent with that person, if a man then has sex with that person,